Hey everybody, it is Patrick McLain. Finally back to you guys after Reimagine 2020. We got some sleep for about a week. I think this is the first time you guys have heard from us since. We didn't realize how hard it was going to be to make 72 hours of straight content. And you start doing the math on it and you realize each hour is actually about 5 hours. So the Reimagine and Mouse Belt team caught a little time over the last week, but we have some, I think, exciting announcements for you guys here the next few days for all the students, etc. I think we're going to pretty much announce like the next event mid-July. And I'm excited for it. It feels like everybody had a good time. And, you know, our goal is kind of to break the monopoly of some of these crypto conferences and all these people, you know, whether people are getting a good value or not. We think we can do this a lot better online and, you know, have a better conversation, right? And again, another example of that I think is the conversation we're going to have right now. So we're very lucky after we just stole a bit of his time about, I don't know, Craig, 14 days ago or something. He decided to give us a bit more. But we have Craig right here. But a few things I want to talk to him about. And but first off, Craig, how you doing? How's the family? How's the UK?
Locked down and annoyed with all the stupidity. But other than that, good.
What's the stupidity?
At least
the lockdown?
Exactly. It is the most stupid thing ever. I keep pointing out to people, 250,000 people died in at least, probably more if you not recording all the ones in third world countries, in 2008/9. The swine flu at that stage actually became a pandemic, but because we had a global financial meltdown, no one even noticed.
Right. Well, like we were just talking briefly before the call. I mean, I woke up just a few days ago, right? And not to correlate it to what we just did during COVID, but there might be some correlation. I mean, the US is burning down right now, right? Like, and we were just talking, like, I'm not sure it's exactly discoordinated, right? Not that people don't have a reason to be angry, but like, what happens after you keep people in their house for many months, right? Like,
well, when you destroy the economy, when you destroy their jobs, their future, when you take away anything that they had as hope, the entire sort of problem here is the only thing that really keeps many people going is hope. I think I've lost your audio.
Sorry about that.
I'm sorry.
This microphone, I always forget it has a button. But I was kind of trying to think about how to frame this conversation. And one thing that came to my mind is, like, you know, we did probably 80 interviews in the last like few weeks for this conference, right? By far, I would say yours has had like 10x more engagement, right? And one thing I found very interesting is if like I read like, you know, 60, 70, 80 YouTube comments, I think people actually enjoyed hearing from you, right? It's like 150 likes and 10 thumbs down, right? And I started telling like a few of my friends and people in crypto that like, I really enjoy talking to you and I think you're a smart guy and all of this. And like, I feel like some of them kind of gave me the cold shoulder, right? And I always find this in my life, like people don't think clearly when they just start making irrational decisions, you know? And I'm looking at them, I'm like, did you even listen to the guy talk? Like no one can sit there and bullshit me for like 2 hours and talk about a myriad of subjects and be that intelligent for 2 hours. And then at the same time say that he's not, right? So I guess I just want to ask you, like, I mean, clearly, like, you probably are used to seeing that by now, but like, A, how does that make you feel? And like, is it deserved? And like, what do people not understand?
We've stopped educating people. We train people. When you do math and law and engineering, that is training. It's not education. Education is about how you fit into society, about knowledge of the past, all of those things. And if I have to point one thing to myself, which is something I recognize and whatever else, that fits with a perfect story, which is a Roman one rewritten by Shakespeare, which would be Coriolanus. Coriolanus was a general who came back and effectively wanted to be sort of put up and rewarded and be one of the two sort of people running Rome for a year or so after all his time out there in the field and all the rest, as sort of a career path in Rome was. But Coriolanus didn't want to do what was demanded by certain people, and others used that against him. So there's lots of stories that fit reality even now. Nothing here is new. We've got this, it's different because it's crypto, it's different because it's whatever. No, it's not. Nothing's different. Code is not law because code requires people. Code is just a form of program machine. And all we have is people acting and people being hidden. And sometimes code allows us to have the wizard behind the curtain and hide who's doing it. But the reality here is it's still always an individual. So it's an individual making choices and having agency, and it's always a person. And whether that's myself and my mistakes or other people and their mistakes or whatever else, it's always us.
So like, the next time one of my friends tells me that you're not Satoshi, what do I tell them? like if you would say anything, and you might not even care, right? But like, I just want to speak in like the abstract, right?
Well, what are they trying to force? What is their whole scenario that they're looking at? I mean, they don't even know the history of what they're talking about. People have different agendas. So censorship resistance, that's not a story by me. It's not a Satoshi story. It's not part of Bitcoin. It was started by the Electronic Frontiers Foundation in response to WikiLeaks and other things, something that I actually said was not good. So ironically, some of the things people run around saying the key aspects of crypto are actually not things that I agreed with. They're things that came in 2011 after I left the public spotlight.
So do you think that, and this is actually generally my opinion, that like, at least if we just say the crypto space, when I look at it from a blunt like perspective, I think that potentially, and maybe people get mad listening to this, that like 90 to 95% of the noise in the space is not by highly educated people. And I would say like probably 90% of the noise, people that don't even know how to write a line of code, right? And not that that's the end all be all is having, knowing how to write code, but like, do you feel like people
it's not even necessarily code. It's a lot of people are driven by what they're told. They don't think for themselves. So I picked on a particular Shakespearean play, Coriolanus, and this was an aspect of it. The people actually had said that we'll vote you as consul. And then the tribunes came in there and stirred things up. And the tribunes had an agenda, rather underhanded one. And the people didn't think about it. And this is an aspect of much of history and society. And we're seeing it even now in the US and other aspects. People who are rioting, not because they even really understand what they're rioting about sometimes.
And it actually brings me to like one point I wanted to discuss. One of the takeaways that I found like really interesting after our last conversation, and I think I brought it up, was just, I think trying to connect those dots between, your work in the church, I kind of re-listened to a few conversations the last few days just before we had this conversation. You know, heard you talk about, again, like past interviews, like being the trustee of the church, you know, not to go personal, saying something about like your single mother, charities, making sure that like you really wanted to make sure that money got to the right places, right? And I think when I pulled out from our previous conversation, I didn't realize, I think, how much the statements that you're making in a lot of aspects are kind of the antithesis, or at least what a lot of people in the community are in now, right? Which are like hide money, screw the banks, right? Completely like all this stuff.
Make money without working, gambling, get rich quick, pump and dump.
Right. So, okay. And I'll lead to my point here, or my question is to say, so it seems like you kind of really want to enforce accountability, both at the government level, the financial markets, right? So how do you kind of perceive, do you understand how different your perspective is there? Is that very clear to you?
Very much so. I mean, not just study everything now. I mean, I look at the past. I mean, I'm actually doing a Master of Art in History at the same time we're speaking now. I've just started that. And it's interesting seeing many of the same things reenact themselves throughout history. In particular, what I'm studying is in microhistories in places, not the big events, not wars, not government, not whatever else, but individual lives and how people lived. And you see the same problems over and over throughout history. And it's always because of a lack of education. It's people not taking account for themselves and learning and training and deciding to know more and wanting everything now. I mean, I understand you can want things now, but there's a difference between wanting and understanding that it's going to take time if you actually want to build something. And there are very few of us. I mean, there are some people who will never be able to. They don't have the ability to sort of take on education at that level, but majority of people can. And the majority of people who aren't doing it because they want some quick, easy fix, well, that's the problem. When you have a quick, easy fix, it just leads into another quick, easy fix. And it never ends. When you put things into it over time, when you demonstrate grit, when you keep working at things, that's when things actually work. When it succeeds.
I was on a call the other day with like 10 people and they kept defaulting and being like, this person can't handle this. This person can't handle this. And I'm hearing it across the call. And I just say, okay, how about this? Each time you guys run into an issue that you can't solve, or you say that everybody else, you're the only person that could solve it, let's try to teach everybody. And if they really can't learn, then you message me, right? And like, I'll be like, okay, we can't teach them this. But just like that one point set off like 10 people, right? It's like, yes. I think people can understand. And I'm very like optimistic in that sense that I think like, I'm very confident that most people can figure out most things, right? Given the time and they follow the right behaviors. But so is it safe to say that you feel that like portions of what your visions are for Bitcoin really holds people accountable and like primarily, like maybe in a lot of ways, governments and like financial institutions?
Everyone should be accountable at the end of the day, not just individuals, but governments and whatever else, because governments are just people. There's no such thing as, I mean, it's a simplified way of talking about things, but governments are just people. They're individuals. They're collections of individuals who will communicate, will interact, and have their own agendas. So anytime you look at the executive power in a nation, the legislative power, the whatever, these are all individuals with their own agenda. And if we can't hold people accountable at a lower level, we can't hold them accountable at the top levels either. So accountability is something that we need to build into society through all levels.
So like in current affairs, like what would your advice be, right? Like maybe there's a lot of people waking up in America today that aren't happy and they were just stuck in their house. And like you said, maybe they lost their job and they're watching someone of the same skin color, right? Like die in the streets, right? Like, what would you tell them about how to hold the people accountable? Like, maybe you don't agree with the tactics they're taking now, but like, what might be some tactics they could take to hold people accountable?
If you're seeing something that's going wrong, do whatever you can, whether that's taking a video or reporting it or standing up or taking responsibility for your own action or whatever else. But it means actually being involved, not just turning a blind eye, being willing to expose yourself to risk, being willing to take that to make society better. So a lot of us will sit there and say, oh, it's too hard. But if everyone said oh, it's too hard, then nothing would have ever occurred, and we would be not in any society, but rather in this primitive state where majority of people still end up being raped and murdered and things like this. I mean, contrary to what the noble savage idea, primitive society wasn't all that nice. If you look at primitive societies right now, the murder rate is something like 70 times what it will be in our society. Practically 1/3 of all sort of adult males would have died from murder. Practically 80% of women would have been suffered rape. So we have to think that if we want a society that has these things that protect us, that make our lives better, it comes with a cost. And we can't just sit there going, someone else will do it. We have to be responsible. And this is really, we're at a turning point. We are at the point where Rome was around the time of Julius Caesar, around Marcius and Sulla and whatever else, where the sort of change from a republic was really there. That could have been something more.
When you say like weird, you mean like Western civilization, or?
I mean Western civilization. And if we want to keep growing, if we want the Enlightenment to continue, to have growth and not to fall back into decay, because technology won't save us. Technology won't stop people falling into a state of sort of anarchy and disrepair. Only we will. Only education, knowledge, and the ability to want this, to sacrifice, to fight for it will. So giving up fighting for that led to the capture of the Roman Republic into effectively a monarchy. They didn't call it that, but that's what the principality really was. The imperator becoming the emperor led to a slow decay. And there were some good emperors, but for every good emperor, there were 3 or 4 bad ones.
So is that kind of how, I mean, like when I look at you sometimes, I look at you from the aspect, my perspective, and I think last time we talked, I really didn't have a perspective, right? And I think you probably helped form my perspective of you after our last conversation. And, you know, part of my takeaway is like, dude, why don't you just run away and like get out of this conversation, right? And so I feel like you know that that's an option probably, but have you made that not an option? Like, do you feel like you have like really now having to stand your ground and like you cannot go backwards now?
Correct. The thing is, if someone doesn't take a stand, then nobody will take a stand. And Bitcoin's not there to help people sell drugs online or anything like this, which really did not help people. Like the false narrative that all these people were saved because of Silk Road is absolute BS. No one reported sort of tainted drugs because Silk Road, well, let's see, if you die, you don't get, your parents don't go on and go, Jimmy bought really bad cocaine and ended up in the hospital. It didn't happen. This, oh, we can report things. It didn't happen. There were children who, like teenagers in universities, who had rat poison laced amphetamines and ecstasy, who died. There are ones that had tainted drugs with heroin or phenyl injected into it. None of them got to sit there and go, well, I don't like this buyer. That's just the way it was. It's not a market where you can go and complain to law enforcement or someone higher. So if none of us take responsibility, if someone doesn't stand the line, someone doesn't decide no and put their foot down and face the onslaught no matter what the cost, then none of us will, and everything falls apart.
So I feel like you are openly calling out a lot of people, right? Like in saying like these people are scammers, and you're not letting people like slander you in conversations. Like, do you envision yourself as kind of like the guy in the middle now? Like you are the person fighting this, and like no one else is stepping up to the plate? Like, is that how you envision it, or what is your motivation?
I'm not the only one. I've got a good team at Enchain now. I've got other people. There's other people who are supportive now. So it's no longer just me, but someone has to stand at the front and do it. And if we want a world that we're willing to live in, that we want our children to live in, then you have to actually stand and risk. You can't just assume that everyone else is going to do it for you. I don't want to be in a world where it's easy for kids to get hooked onto opiates. I don't want to be in a world where people aren't educated. I don't want to be in all of that. And right now, that's what we're facing. I want people to be protected from stupidity and whatever else. When you see this sort of stuff about get rich quick by putting your pension money into Bitcoin because it's going to go up another 10,000 times. I'm sorry, but you're being conned. Yes, Bitcoin went up, but no one knew that it would at the beginning. And it definitely won't go up another 10,000 times. It's not going to go up another 100 times in the next year or so. It's not going to go up another 10 times in that period. So you've missed it. Get over it. Work hard, build something, and that might go up that many times if you put the time and the effort. Not because you have crypto. It's not going to. It's already where it is. You either build it and people use it, or it's going down. So very simple. Stop scamming people into giving you an exit strategy and build something. If you don't have a system that people want to use, it's not going to be valuable. So these people who sit there telling you to day trade, to be a jobber, don't. It's gambling. Those people promoting these things, don't. If you want to build something, great. But don't assume that things are going to go up just because, well, coin goes up. It doesn't. Shares don't. Commodities don't. They're not exponential. They're logistic. That's an S-curve. And we're already hitting the top of the S-curve. So the other option is it goes down. So people either build something that makes this really valuable and useful, or it goes down. And that means stopping to just trade.
And I want to pivot to that here in just a minute, because I do want to hear more about InChain. I don't think I got to talk to you about it enough about it last time. And like, what are you guys really building, right? Like, what are these applications? What excites you? But just kind of stay on the topic of like societies and kind of like perspectives. One thing that like really pulled out from our last conversation, and I heard you talk about it a few more times, like listening to some other ones, is, and I think I have a unique perspective, or at least I want to know your answer, because like maybe I have some of the same ideas. Like I lived in San Francisco for like a decade, right? And in a lot of ways I'd say, okay, like it made me more inquisitive about technology. I can find a lot of good aspects about it. I could probably also give some negative aspects about it. But like I've heard you talk about this city, and I want to make sure that I'm clear. When you say Silicon Valley, are you is that kind of like like an analogy for programmers, or like really there's something about the Bay Area? But like, what is it about that? Like, why do you have such, like, I've heard you say it's a cancer, right? So like, I just want to know why you think that.
I'm not thinking programmers. Programmers work for Microsoft and they're not Silicon Valley. Programmers work for Amazon, and they're not Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley didn't used to be what it is now. What it is now is this advertising-based scum pit, where no one could figure out how to make micropayments on the internet, and we ended up selling everything. The Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters have nothing now to make business other than selling your data, your information, your life, your movements, your purchases, your everything, your privacy. So it's not the old school Silicon Valley. It's not the Apples, the Sun Microsystems when they existed, the computer manufacturers, the Intels, the people who actually built something. It's these people who are milking the globe for money, who are selling our privacy, who are becoming mega corporations that think they have no responsibility for what they're doing. The companies like Twitter, who can promote agendas that basically have become a way of getting criminals and terrorists to find other criminals and terrorists, and to find people who are on the outskirts of society, and to sell that information to terrorist groups, to criminal groups. And that's part of what's happening. So right now you have terrorist groups and criminal groups buying data on individuals so that they can trace them down and indoctrinate them. You find people who mix into that psychological profile, and you indoctrinate them. And the information is becoming there because of how we have structured the internet. So Mr. Trump over there in the US has just taken a little bit of a stand because Twitter managed to annoy him enough. But this is the whole point. These people have made a system of discord and are calling it free speech, where they actually manipulate what's happening and encourage trolls and encourage not debate, but dissent, where they have the lowest common denominator promoted. So that's what I'm talking about. And it's not the people necessarily, it's not the people working in Silicon Valley. It's the people at the top.
So it sounds like it's like you envision it as like Facebook, Amazon, Google. Like it's the
well, Amazon's not even Silicon Valley, so
yeah. There's Seattle, I guess, but yeah. I mean, they all have representation there, right? But like, so is it just like the data theft model that you despise, or is it even, does it go deeper in like the philosophies of how engineers are approaching things? Does any of that carry over to the Bitcoin side of like what you think has kind of created some of the mess? Like, do you kind of bind those two groups together at all?
I think the mess we're seeing in many ways, even this lockdown, is, I blame Twitter for this lockdown, not the virus, because this isn't the biggest pandemic that no one's noticed. The pandemic 10 years ago, nobody noticed, killed a few 100,000 people without anyone actually realizing it occurred. So it's not a good thing that we have a pandemic, but this is a normal part of every 10 to 20 years. The world goes through this all the time. It's just now that we've got this idea that we can cure everything, solve everything.
And you blame Twitter because they're the platform that's connected the most amount of people, or you think that there's actions they should have or should have not taken that you do hate Twitter, the concept, or you think it should be managed differently?
I think basically they actually incentivize people to spread lies, to attack, to have false identities, all of the rest. They are actively out there promoting discord. So I mean, it's not random when you find things popping up on Twitter. It is actually promoted based on the cookies on your machine, based on other information that they want to promote. So Jack Dorsey will be out there with his agendas, and he will promote those, and others in Twitter with their agendas will promote those.
And for the record, for anyone listening, for Jack Dorsey listening, and we'll be tweeting this out at you. I think your title on your page says something about Bitcoin or how much you love Bitcoin. And I think many big people during our conference last week, while it was live, were tweeting at you to come join us for a few minutes to tell all these students around the world working on Bitcoin and blockchain. And I didn't see you show up once, Jack, but apparently Craig cares enough to show up twice.
Jack doesn't want Bitcoin. Jack wants modified Bitcoin and trying to get Lightning working so that he can have Square. He just wants to redo PayPal and have a different version of PayPal. He wants Square to be able to have a more effective way of doing things, but that's fine. He'll end up just paying me money anyway, because all of the things he wants to do I've already patented. So.
Oh, got it. Well, but like, is this inherently then, like, do you believe this news cycle is what contributes? I mean, I guess I'm just gonna ask you straight up. Like, I don't like bullshitting people at some point, right? So I want to like, I would like to talk to you more in the future. I enjoy talking to you, but I want to cross a bridge. Like, you are aware that people online are just saying, for deserved or not, Craig Wright is a liar, Craig Wright is a fraud, whatever little boxes they put. I would actually advocate and say that most people that I've seen say that couldn't walk me through any technical steps of anything. So I'm a little hesitant to take their advice on things. But like, is it a news cycle thing? Is it like this media clip? No one's doing their research. They're getting it from whatever article or website, and they scan the headline and they don't actually read the article or do any follow-up research?
When you go to Forbes and you see one of these articles and people go, oh, that's a responsible journalist. And then you read contributor. Contributor is the new paid advertising piece. Forbes sold their identity. It's basically Forbes have staff who are real news. And then whenever you see Bitcoin things on Forbes, it's contributors, which means someone who in the past you would have by law had to have this thing, paid advertising piece all over the page, because that's what they are. These Forbes contributors until recently weren't even paid. Now they're paid practically nothing. And how they earn their money is they go out there and they write for people who want to do pump and dump scams. So responsible journalism, no. So what we have are these things that cause basically a whole lot of false ideas about what Bitcoin is, about what other things are, because they can make money. People like Binance, well, they want to be able to enable the criminals to get their money in and out of the system. It's a money laundering scam for these. So what you need if you want criminals doing drug money is you need a whole lot of dumb people with no idea about what they're doing. You want them to come onto the system and be willing to gamble and lose money. And those people then become a electronic money mule who, without even understanding what they're doing, enable the people smugglers, the drug traffickers, all this stuff to take their money and wash it back and forwards through Tether, through whatever else. And that's what's being enabled right now. And this will disappear. It always disappears very quickly. People don't seem to understand the whole tokenized shares and whatever else. The Wild Wild Web article from 1996 covered all of this. Everyone's forgotten web IPOs. Everyone's forgotten distributed cryptocurrencies. I didn't invent the first distributed cryptocurrency. There were distributed cryptocurrencies 20 years ago. Cryptocurrency 20 years ago was over $1 trillion market. It vanished in weeks. Why? Because it wasn't law abiding. People sit there going, Bitcoin, you can't stop it. Bull. You can stop Bitcoin like that. There are 32 nodes in the last 12 months on BTC. No more, 32. To be a node, you have to create a block. If you don't create a block, you're not a node. It's not a mesh network. You don't help propagate running your Raspberry Pi. It doesn't matter how many Raspberry Pis there are. So there are 3 nodes that control 50%. 3 nodes with over $500 million investment. 3 nodes that will follow court orders like that. 2 of those are registered to American corporations, even though they're Chinese. They will take orders. So stop listening to the BS and think.
So is there a vast conspiracy against you, or do you sell the most, are you like the most headline grabbing person? Like to me, it's like probably one of those 2 things, right? Like,
so if we,
why do you think you pop up in the news so often? Why do you think you're such a controversial figure?
When there are billions at risk, when there are criminals laundering billions, do you think that they're going to sit there and allow people to want to listen? So people think I can be stopped and that Twitter is going to stop my voice getting out there. But remember, I'm with a university in a law program. The people on the, cryptocurrency task force in the UK, I've met some of them. I will be meeting others. It doesn't matter that Twitter and Facebook and all these other things stop me. I've met with a number of people in the House of Lords. I've met with a number of people in other areas. So
how can there be such a big disconnect? I guess that's my question, right? Like, I actually believe what you're telling me. Like, I think that you're negotiating stuff. Like, you don't seem like a guy that's shook to me, right? I could point out to you people that are scared. Like, and maybe I don't know you, but like, that's my general opinion right now. So it's like, what is the disconnect? Like, how can the conversation be so lopsided on one side, right? You sit here, look at me calmly, and like, what is that disconnect? Is that there are people that are consciously putting out fake information collectively, or that it is just
it's a bit of all the above? But I'll quote from 10 years ago, or a little over 10 years ago, the CEO of Citibank, while the music's playing. So at the moment, the music is playing for a lot of these people. They're making money. This whole idea of it's decentralized is not new. The whole idea of Coder's law is not new. And it came crashing down before. So there were groups who said, we are developer groups and we're not a company. You can't stop us. And that all fell apart in the past. The SEC basically just said to them, so you're a partnership. All those controls and protections that you would have had as a shareholder in a company, you've decided not to have. That's fine. We can now go over and go after every individual in your partnership because they are jointly and severally liable. So when you're a partnership, when you have something like this, then the partners are liable in full. Companies are limited liability. So the government's not going to rush to change this because there are already protections for individuals. Companies protect people. They protect the investors. They don't protect the government. It was a hard-won sort of struggle to get company sort of acts in place. It took hundreds of years. Partnerships mean every individual is liable. And when you're out there in this distributed group who are, we're just a bunch of software developers, that's called a partnership, a general partnership, which means if someone rips off someone else, you're liable. If the coin that you're working on goes bankrupt and takes other people out, you're liable. If the SEC enforces something, every one of those developers is liable. But hey, don't ask me. There's this thing called law. It's well and truly documented. And there's lots of people bullshitting around at the moment. But I'm sorry, I'm going into court this year in a few places, and the cards are going to tumble. That little house you've got of cards, it's coming down.
Is that your end weapon? Is that your end result? Is like that if somebody slanders you or you see something wrong, that you're going to follow the proper steps, take them to court? I mean, I would be remiss not to say, I think there was just a case with you and Roger Ver, right? A Brown libel, for example, right? And like, is that something that that's going to be the path you pursue without resilience,
yes.
like with resilience?
Yes. Even when people like Roger decide to be cowards and try and argue that it should have been done in the US, when he's not in the US, when I'm not in the US. So yeah, even then.
How is that going well? Or one of the things that you told me last time, you were like, which I kind of believe, it's like, I bet you, well, like when I see Zuckerberg in front of Congress, right? It's like he's explaining Libra to them, and it's like, you could clearly tell these people don't know, right? Like they're elderly senators or whatever, right? It's education for them. Like, and the last time we talked, you were like, we're educating these people, right? Like, are you seeing that play out fairly? Like when we talk about corruption or whatever, like, are you seeing receptiveness there? Are you seeing that you're going against the grain or what?
All of the above. It takes time. And the media is always a bit stupid. And anyone who believes the media, in this case, is rather daft as well, because remember, we're not seeing media. When you see Forbes contributors, you're not seeing journalism. You're seeing paid marketing. So that's what people don't get. When you see these blogs, they're not journalism. Journalism isn't anything you read in a newspaper. It's not a bipartisan review of all of the things like it used to be. So I'm picking on Forbes a lot here because Forbes are particularly bad at some of this right now. And their little tiny print that says contributor, and then you click on and it explains what it is really difficult for most people to ever notice. What it should have is this big stripe paid advertising piece, like you used to actually see in newspapers.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we see that, right? Like even in television and stuff, people are forced to disclose these types of moments, right? Like, yeah, it seems like they're licensing out their brand for whatever third party or contractor might have an agenda or an opinion, and it sounds like people can pay to play. Okay, well then fair enough. So then in the last 2 weeks, like, what articles have you read about you that are not accurate? Like tell everybody a lie.
Well, I try not to read any of those things. I haven't seen any articles that about me that have been accurate, so I don't bother reading them.
But nothing. I mean, like what is so blatant? Like, if you want people to understand something right now, like, I mean, it would be hard for me to believe that you probably ignore the media completely, but like, I mean, it could even be in the past. Like, what are some just blatantly false things that you would tell people to go and research themselves, and they might open their eyes to be like, stop reading the media?
The attacks against patenting. The attacks against patenting are only because I'm doing it better. It's that simple. I mean, Blockstream tried to patent things. The Chinese guys are all trying to patent things. Hal Finney had commercial patents, not defensive patents. He made money on them. He had money from royalties on commercial products. This socialist bullshit that we're seeing, I'm sorry, but all the people out there, Eric Voorhees, whatever else, are all with patents, sitting there going, oh, Craig Wright's so evil because he has patents. Antonopoulos has a crappy patent to his name. So
you feel like you're vilified because like you're very clearly stating a profit motive or something, like in the fact that you want to collect royalties downstream through patents?
I'm not stating a profit motive on that at all. I'm protecting what we're doing. And these other people are sitting there basically being hypocritical and disingenuous in what they're saying and saying, we're doing it for the goodness of other people. BS. Absolute BS.
So you're saying that the misinformation there is not that you're patenting things to force people to license them from you, but you're saying you're doing it to ensure that it stays like true, or that you can make sure it doesn't get in the wrong hands?
If I've got a system I want to build and I've created technology along those lines, it's my choice on how my technology is used. You may not like that. Too bad. Go invent something yourself. And you can sit there complaining, oh, Craig Wright's got patents with other people's stuff in there. That's how a patent works. So you've got this prior art section in a good patent. So when I have a third of our patents saying all this other stuff that happened before that other people have invented, that's called prior art. And anyone who does a good patent, not like most of the crypto ones, will actually detail all of that and then say how theirs differs. That's basically how you actually do things well.
Got it. And on that point, can we pivot to N-Chain a bit? I would just like to understand more, like, from what I can see from the outside, it's like you guys are marketing yourselves as an enterprise grade solution using Bitcoin or variations of it.
Fairly much, yes. So at the end of the day, all this stuff, starting with Tim May and others, where everyone's going to have their own currency, the cypherpunk BS is absolute bull. No one wants to have their own money. There's a reason why Europe moved away from having 100 different currencies into just the euro. It's simpler, it's more efficient. And the same thing's going to happen with cryptocurrencies, or rather digital money. No one wants that other than those running bucket shop exchanges. So if you're running the Bitcoin.com exchange, or you're running Binance or Bitfinex or any of these other basically bucket shops, then you're going to be running around going, everyone needs their own cryptocurrency. Why? Because they make 1% on any trade. That's really what it's about. They're lying to you because they don't care if the money goes up. They don't care if it goes down. They don't care if it goes sideways, as long as you trade it. They just want you to gamble. So at the end of the day, they're going to promote this system that allows you to lose your money, the same as a one-arm bandit, where you just pull down or now press a button and a percentage of your money goes. And that's really what it's about. Because if you look at all these things where people trade online and make money, no, they don't. The estimates, the research has shown that about 75% of people lose money. And you can sit there going, oh, 25% of people make money. So what? That means more than half of the people lost. It's not even equal. Most people lose. 75% lose. If you're talking about those odds, go to a casino. They're regulated, they're honest. Pull the pokey machine.
We talked last time. I told you I was from Las Vegas, and it's one lesson I learned. People always could say, "Oh yeah, this guy always wins," and that's the minute I go, "Yeah, that guy's not telling you the truth. He's not telling you about the time he loses, right?"
Yeah, he comes back and he goes, "Look what I've won," and then Didn't you go to Las Vegas 3 other weeks this month? Each weekend? No. No, I didn't spend any money when I went there. I was just going to investigate the desert. The desert is very pretty in Las Vegas. I love walking around looking at property in the desert.
People don't tend to advertise their losses.
Exactly.
But okay, so what is Enchain? Like, what excites you most about Enchain? Like, what are you guys building? Why are you going to be the best at it? How is no one going to stop you?
Plumbing. I mean, we're building plumbing. So companies like Cisco went and built a whole lot of boring stuff, which is the plumbing for the internet. We're building the plumbing for the accounting network that will be over top of the internet, that will allow the next version of whatever's going to replace the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, the ones that will be there without selling your data. So Google wanted to do something where they didn't have to sell your data or do advertising, you know, do no evil, all that stuff. And then they went, stuff it and we can make money. Facebook, the same. Twitter, I think they were just evil from the start. So basically, those companies will be there and will be able to build and have micropayments. And there'll be companies with logistics and companies with Internet of Things. And all this stuff will be able to start building over the next 20 years. And we want to just be there in the background, being the boring ledger and accounting company that keeps track of it all, that manages it all, that reports it all.
Got it. So, I do a decent amount of like corporate innovation. And it had some really interesting talks in the last few weeks. I mean, we have a lot of big companies we're talking to, and I've been listening to them. I just kind of like laugh at how they've been approaching blockchain for a while at some point. Like I can almost like walk into a room with them and be like, let me guess, you did this, and then you joined a consortium, and then that didn't work out. And then you had this other pilot, and like you did 1 truck of blockchain and you spent $5 million. Like, that's right. And I think, go ahead.
But they managed to raise money. It's like the guy I went off on in 2018 and in one of the stupid token things in the ICO craze, where he's sitting there going, look, I had this great idea. I raised $50 million and my idea didn't work, but it's wonderful. Now I can sit there and not have to work while I think of another idea. What crud. Companies who get too much money too soon fail. People who get too much money too soon fail. If you want to be successful, you need to be hungry. You need to be working hard, thinking that you're going to fail every second day. You need to be dreaming it, thinking it. You need to wake up in a cold sweat every night wondering where the money's going to be coming from, because when you're thinking your business 24/7, when you're putting it first and foremost in everything you're thinking, that's when you have your mind on your business, when it's thinking why you're not going to fail and why you're solving problems before they become problems. When you're just getting a bunch of money and then doing nothing, you become absolutely useless, as all those people did. So they got out there and they got money, and now they're rich. And what are they doing? Are they building anything new? Are they delivering anything new? Are they sitting there creating anything new? I have not seen one of those people who made money in the ICO boom do anything.
Well, they didn't really make money in the ICO boom. They just reappropriated investors' money. They didn't actually.
That's true.
Not many of them actually sold a single thing. And it's actually what kind of inspired me to get into this space. And I think we talked last time. It's one of the things I always hated about Silicon Valley. Like one day, if you have a few minutes, get on a call with my partner. I'm telling you, I met this kid when he was 20. The best person you ever met. He's like 28, 29 now, complete genius. Like the real technical, half a book. Like me and him for a decade have worked together and always laughed. right? We watch companies raise $5 million and then build nothing. And we're just like, dude, like it was just never in our ethos, right? So
Yep.
I definitely totally understand what you're saying. And I guess to kind of pivot off that, like, you know, I think maybe I told you briefly last time, I started my first company 15 years ago when I was 19. So I've never worked for anyone. So like one of the things that I had to figure out, like I didn't come from like money, like my parents didn't give me money. Like one of the things I had to figure out was how to stay motivated. And one of the things I think I did naturally was like people would advise you against it, right? Say, don't work with your friends. But I really like the people I work with and like are my friends before or become my friends, like kind of consider them my family. So it's like, I always tell everybody, it's like my secret weapon. Like I get up each day because I don't want to embarrass them basically. Like I can't ask them to do anything. And then like, I'm just not doing anything. So it's like, that's my motivation, but like, what's yours? Like, how do you wake up with that sense of urgency every day?
I've got something to create. I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. I want to build something. I didn't come into this thinking, how do I get rich? I came in with a goal in building, a creating of having something there, and I haven't done it yet. We don't have a world that has moved away from advertising into micropayments. We don't have a world that records and allows people to track cash. So as an example, everyone sits there saying cash is anonymous. It's not. I'm trying to remember the name of the case. There was a serial killer case here in the UK around 30 years ago now. And it was tracked because of cash. The person was paid and the serial number was recorded, etc., in the paycheck, and money that was later spent and found was used to track the serial killer. So all this cash has never been anonymous. It can be pseudonymous for small amounts where people don't care. But if you try and go into a country without declaring $50,000 worth of American bills that are strapped around you, see what happens.
Hey, on that topic, do you think there's a day, because it's something I always joke about, do you think there's a day where when people fly around with like ledgers and they get off a plane that they're going to be forced to unlock them?
You shouldn't need to unlock them to show things. I mean, that's not how it would work, but I've already done that. In 2013, I did a little stunt to prove things to the government where I declared the Bitcoin I was taking in and out of the country, which ended up having to go to Canberra, the capital, because they didn't have enough zeros on the sort of declaration. They only went up to 9,999,999.99. And of course, I went out with like 15 million and declared it. And the poor guy in the customs thing sitting there going, I don't know what to do. And he called in his supervisor, and everyone else hated me because like people were waiting to be able to do their GST refunds and all the other things. And I basically screwed all of that up for like 3 hours waiting for the plane. And so, yeah, it's not, it just takes time for people to recognize these things. But anyway. And I'm missing your voice again.
Oh, man. But at some point when we sign those forms that say, I'm not bringing a negotiable instrument of over $10,000 into the country, theoretically, anybody that's flying with a ledger who has that on that private key on there is lying. I mean, is that fair? Like,
potentially, yes. When people are moving money around physically, remember you can electronically do things as well. So you don't need to declare when you're coming into a country and moving money from bank to bank. That's more automated. So it depends on how you're doing it. But when you're actually physically transmitting the location of Bitcoin, then you should actually be declaring it. But
right. I mean, the key is at that point, I mean, it's like a physical representation, or it can be negotiated for whatever, you know,
yeah,
value.
your Bitcoin
But
doesn't live on the blockchain. It lives with you.
yeah, like if somebody flies to the airport with like $1 million in jewelry, they can run into problems, right? Like carrying that jewelry can be considered like transmitting that wealth, right? But to kind of come back to Enchain a little bit, because I want to get into a bit more of the specifics, like what are, and I think maybe I wasn't 100% clear what I was saying earlier. What I was saying is that when I talk to corporations, I kind of laugh at how they're approaching blockchain. I think they're kind of trying to figure it out. In some cases, I think they're just trying to figure it out to like stay in the PR news cycle and like have their own blockchain article. I don't know if they're actually trying to figure it out.
You're probably, well, too young, but if you go back to the internet in the 1990s, it's really the same sort of thing. You had Novell, you had Banyan, you had DECnet, you had IBM's whatever the hell stupid thing that they had, the internet, of course, and all of this was out there at the same time. And it was the same hype cycle, the same, you can have an intranet or private blockchain now. We're going through the same cycle again. It's the Satriana bit. Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it.
Okay, so and I was on a. Do you know the guy Paul Brody from Ernst & Young? Do you know who he is?
I've heard the name.
I got to talk to him the last few weeks. I deal with like Anheuser-Busch, Coca-Cola. I got them all on a panel the other day. Paul Brody actually opened my mind a bit, because I sit in a lot of rooms where I think people just kind of exclusively say, enterprises will not adopt public chains. There's no point, right? So like everybody's advocating for this like hyperledger, and I'm looking at it from the outside and I'm like, wow, was all of enterprise blockchains just supposed to be hyperledger? Like, is that the answer? Like,
well, here's your first bit. You don't have a blockchain unless it's public. Full stop.
Right.
The security model is not hash power or whatever else. It is publishing the root addresses. And that doesn't mean that your whole thing is now public. It only means the hash is public. So basically, this sounds like the same crud that was said about the internet. No one will use the internet because, and I went through that in the 90s, and IBM and some of the big four and Novell and all that ran around with the same bull. And here's the thing. Hyperledger isn't secure, not because it doesn't have hashing or anything like that, but because you can have 1,000 versions of it costlessly. It doesn't solve anything. It is just a slow sort of database that doesn't work properly. It doesn't offer anything more than Oracle. You can have a distributed MySQL database that actually has more security, more controls than every single control on Hyperledger globally. And guess what? No one's telling you that. But it's exactly the same thing. The Hyperledger around the internet and the problems and everything like this, it's the same stuff, the same thing all over again. IBM in there, we can't solve it, so we're going to shit on it.
Well, and I think IBM did go through a phase, right, where like they tried open source, and it seems like they pioneered some things, right, and then they kind of lost out on the business model, right? Like other people adopted their tech and they didn't really capitalize. So I feel like in some ways they're kind of overcompensating a bit now, right? With Hyperledger, where they're like, we tried to contribute to something and then we really want to control it. And like they really now want the dollar output from it.
They always wanted to control it. I mean, they just, IBM are just this sort of behemoth who exists because they have so much money, which they're burning through. I mean, they've been losing a lot of money. But they've got too much money invested and they're earning too much in government bonds and other things to just go away. They're so big. They're a juggernaut that won't stop. But they're not actually doing anything that's really creative. I mean, I know people love to think IBM is doing all X, Y, and Z, but they're not really.
I don't think
they're
people
just
have
sort of
looked at
falling
IBM
along.
as like a creation engine for a while. Like nothing
No.
IBM screams like innovation. But like, so what? It's like to the people that say, like, obviously enterprise companies have had a monopoly over their data or their business relationships. They have these walled gardens.
But you still do. That doesn't
but
change because you've got a blockchain. A
sure.
hash
So
isn't the data.
but here's my question, right? Where like my guess is that they're a little relinquent, right? To start to move things to what they perceive are public chains or that might be able to be manipulated at some point down the line. Like, what would you tell any enterprise listening right now? Like, why would they want, what would they benefit from this? Like what you're advocating for?
The actual whole reason for having it is you have a auditable, reputable source. So the whole, we're going to have private what? We're going to have a private database. Big deal. You have one now. But so you're going to have the equivalent of an Oracle database that is slower than Oracle. You're going to have secret security. The entire security model of Bitcoin is publishing the hash. It's not all the hash power. It's not any of this other stuff. It is public. Read the references in the white paper, number 2 and number 3. You publish the hash. If you don't do that, it doesn't matter that you're on sort of a private blockchain or whatever else. I can run up costlessly 1 billion copies of your books, and that's what will happen. So the whole point of all this is to have a single provable copy. You can't do it after the event. You can't digitally sign something in the past. You can only have it public. You cannot have a digital signature from an anonymous source because signatures require identity, and identity doesn't act. It's a one-way function. You can't then force identity into a signature. This is where people go wrong.
Do they want to be audited? I guess is my question. Like, is this something
they don't have a choice? Companies have to be audited. Sarbanes-Oxley, etc.
Well, they have a choice right now. They're not using blockchain, right? So I'm saying, like, are they willingly going to go into the darkness here, or like, are there other factors?
But that's the point. They already have to do things, so they're spending lots of money to have an inefficient, not always provable, not always legally compliant system.
Exactly. And I've heard you say it, like they run multiple sets of books. That's what I'm saying. Like they're currently living inside of the lines, and they're living inside of lines that they find are immutable, and for the right price, people will make shit up. So like, what is their motivation at this point? Like, if you're going to run a business and say,
so right now, because of Enron and all the rest, every single CEO in America who doesn't have an immutable data source for their accounts is a criminal. Full stop. And I can say that very simply because the law from Sarbanes-Oxley on says if a record can be changed, you don't have the controls in place, you're breaking the law. So you need to have controls. So right now, what happens is people use CDs and expensive processes involving Iron Mountain and locking things away and et cetera, et cetera. So you've got this really expensive methodology to do what Bitcoin can do cheaply. And of course, those people running those things are going to shit all over Bitcoin. Why? Because there's billions and billions at risk. And people shit all over the internet in the 90s. The people running X500 database and protocol systems and networks said, cell-based data is better. You don't want to have anything like the internet. Why? Because they made money. And that's going to happen now until it doesn't.
So should these companies have any fear and I want to frame my question carefully here. Like, should they have any fear to put their data, and I have a few points here. So they have any fear to put their data on public chain where they think it should be anonymized? And I'll pivot to the next point here. And are there any retroactive fears? And I'll give you an example.
But you're not putting your data on the chain.
Go ahead.
Hash is not your data. So if you're putting a hash, you're not putting data.
Give me a use case. Like when you think of an enterprise company that's not in fintech, can you give me your most favorite example? Like what you would think would be a great Bitcoin enterprise solution? That's tracking. So say supply chain, say seed to sale, like what data would they put on chain or transactions?
You don't put data on chain. That's wrong.
Or sorry, like what would they sign on chain?
You just want transaction records. So you want a hash. A hash is an index. So you're just indexing something existed. That's it. That's all you need to do.
So just give me that use case. Like, what do you think would work really well? Like in this supply chain example, there's this moment where they have a hard time trusting or validating a source of truth, and we can help them cut this time down by implementing X method.
I think you're overthinking it. I think just the way things are now, it's just cheaper and easier. It's not any new thing or anything like this. It doesn't need to do any of that. It is just a better way of doing accounting. It's just cheaper. That's it.
So it's literally the signature it's a signature primarily, like rather than setting a piece of paper in somewhere to be validated.
No, none of that. It can be, and you can build those things, but it's just being able to record the hash of information in transactions is able to set up everything, provably having the records in a manner that is cheaper. You're overthinking it all.
No, fair enough. And this is actually why I'm asking the questions. Like I contrary to popular belief, my best friends would say I don't listen sometimes, but I actually like to learn a lot. Is there any fear?
In the past,
yeah,
ledgers were done on paper. Paper's difficult to alter. If someone tries to liquid paper something out, it's easy to see. If they try and sort of erase something, it's easy to see. And then it's difficult because you have to change all the entries. You can still change things validly because you can actually make a ledger entry into errors and omissions and whatever else, and it can be recorded. So anyone who's done accounting will know that on paper ledgers, you can still make changes, but it's easy to see the changes. And that's the important part. So what it is really something that takes everything back to paper. Bitcoin is different in that it takes digital assets, things that were easy to copy and make billions of things inexpensively, and makes it so that there can be a provable single digital copy so that you can bail or have bailments against things, so that you can no longer have this idea that you can have infinite copies of books or products or movies. So you can actually link a product individually. So you can link a record individually. It makes everything back to digital is like the real world, where only one real copy exists.
All right, so my last question on this point, which is, are there any retroactive attacks that can be deployed, do you think, and some people might say it's a quantum computing attack over like 2,000 qubits, attacking SHA-256, right? Or some
quantum
technologies.
Quantum computers are a big, don't even go down. Quantum computers are a scam by people like IBM and everything like that, just to get money out of government. The same thing has been around since the 80s, the same bullshit. You need at least 7 physical qubits to get a single logical qubit. There has never been a single logical qubit invented ever. We get to 5. In 1985, we got to 5. 1990s, we got to 5. 2000s, we got to 5. Right now, we got to 5. Big hype cycle last year, we got to 5. And the technology fell apart at 5 because it is bullshit. It isn't supported in physics. It isn't supported in anything they're doing, but it is a huge multi-billion dollar sink. Billions go out of the US government into this research. and it is just a huge scam. The
Okay,
entirety of quantum computing is just a scam.
Got you there. Obviously, some people are going to disagree with you there. I don't have the knowledge to do it.
Well, if they disagree, show me one.
Yeah, I think like it's clear, like it's something around like what it would take to beat SHA-256 in real time, like while a message is being processed. It's like we need to be in like the 2000
a quantum compute.
Something.
Okay, you still can't do that in real time. The whole thing, SHA is not going to be an issue. Hashing isn't solved by quantum computers. You can factor, in theory, ECDSA and RSA. One quantum computer, if you take the theoretical stuff as true, which I don't, would still take up around 100 hectares to do 3 keys a year at billions of dollars worth of electricity a year, at trillions of dollars worth of investment, full stop. It isn't, I mean, it's not going to be this instant thing like they're saying. It will be 3 to 4 months, a key average. That's it.
So are you then saying, so I just brought up quantum computing and I kind of had a feeling of like what your response would be. And a lot of aspects, I kind of agree. I mean, I feel like it's kind of a black box in what progress is. 100% we've been saying that, like,
basically in physics, there are a lot of people have this idea of infinity because it's easier math. They don't want to go into manifolds. They don't want to go into matroids or anything like this. Having a singularity is a simple solution, and it's wrong. There are no such things as singularities and infinities in physics, really. They are
for anyone listening. This is what I saw the last time I talked to Craig Wright. If you don't know a lot about either, if you don't know how to write code or can't even delve into the conversations of quantum physics or like go in 5 other directions, I swear to you, go like bounce around this dude, talk to him for 1 hour. You cannot jump around these types of topics with about millisecond response time and be completely full of shit for an hour straight. Like, it's not possible. So for anyone that ever wants to tell me in the future that Craig Wright is a fraud, liar, or an idiot, I promise you, like, I've been around really smart people for a long time. You cannot make this shit up. Like, this guy, he's not sitting here like just making up buzzwords when he like, I can just pivot and be like, Craig, what about quantum computing? And Craig's like, da, 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 da. Like, you can't luckily do that like for hours. But hey, let me ask, I want to pivot. I don't want to get stuck on quantum computing, but like, so are you telling me in your personal opinion that there's nothing retroactively in the future that can come back and tamper with the ledger of information, that these companies should have no fear that in the future, so maybe in 50 years.
The secret is it's public. It's not this we act outside of law. It is, if everyone's running SPV and billions of people have a copy of the ledger, then it is instantly recognized. That's the whole security model.
Now you're talking about data changing, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll give you another example where it's something like voting, where we might value the privacy of our vote. And if we vote on the blockchain, that in the future, somebody might be able to read my vote even 200 years from now. Right?
Of course, because that's not a solution. I mean, you're not solving voting with the blockchain. Forget all this crap about proof of work and proof of stake and voting will be solved. No, it won't. That is from people who have no idea about online voting technology. I was the security and other consultant for New South Wales Electoral Commission on iVote, which is a small scale electronic voting thing for people who are in the military, who are disabled, elderly, whatever else, rather than postal vote. And it is not, the database is the simplest part of it. The blockchain is the simplest part of it. The difficulty is, how do you do things like oblivious transfer to ensure that you have someone able to do a vote? How do you make it so that that person cannot then go to another person and say, look, I'm proving I voted this way, so you don't have collusion, so you can't sell votes. How do you, I mean, there are so many other things. It's a simple, you can have voting. It's someone who has no idea what e-voting is really about. I mean, there are systems out there like Cytel and whatever else that I've worked with in the past. And even they don't get it all right. And it's not about blockchain. There are so many things in voting to get a system, and everyone just runs around with this simple idea. As soon as you put it on the blockchain, it's going to work. I mean, no.
That was for people that raise money.
Yeah, of course, that's the thing. We're going to solve everything and just give us $50 million.
Yeah. Oh, I have a token. This is my new fundraising mechanism. So, okay. So what are your favorite use cases then? Like outside of the clear, or what we think is a clear, like what people think now is Bitcoin, like what are the non-fintech? I know you mentioned supply chain. Like, is that it? Are there any others that
no, Internet of Things, securely updating machines, code security, being able to have the integrity of files maintained and monitored, logging and security. Like the first thing any attacker will do is delete your logs. Imagine now if they can't do that, if there's a way of having databases of logs that are secure, encrypted, but cannot be accessed and deleted.
Do you look at like blockchain or Bitcoin as like a form of like Git repository? I've always kind of laughed at the similarities. Like it's kind of like commit to master. There's like all these kind of structural things like to form a source of truth. Like, do you think it's even a way for people to commit code? Maybe even get reimbursed for it?
In future, yes. But then committing code, how do you get, I mean, the number of lines. Fred Brooks had a great book that was first released in the 70s, then redone about coding. And the number of lines is not important. I mean, it's not how many lines you write. As a coder, sometimes, I mean, there's a famous story in Apple about, what's his name, Wozniak, who actually got pulled up because he had a negative code, sort of how many lines of code he's inputting. And it was negative because he took everyone else's code and refactored them and spat out less code. And it was faster and more secure and better. But the HR people were sitting there going, but you're not doing anything. And he's going, of course I am. And that's the whole point. The number of lines of code and whatever else, you can't just go, hey, I've got this, therefore it's better.
You learn this on embedded systems very quickly when you realize like just plain white space is gonna like cause you to have like an overrun. Like I remember when I first started getting into tech, I remember I told someone one time, I was like, we wrote 1 million lines of something, and they looked at me and they were like, are you basing it off of how much code you've written? Like, I don't know, it's probably 20 years old. And I was like, oh yeah, now that you put it that way, I probably could have like done it more efficiently.
Yeah.
So, all right, like, I guess, I know we're going a little over here. So I want to do some rapid fires. Like, let's go back to scammers. Let's go back to people you don't like. Who are like the people that you think you have the least respect for in the space? Anyone listening, who should they not trust?
Anyone who sells you a path to getting rich quick. Anything that is going to make you money by signing up because you've signed up. Anything that doesn't require a lot of hard work.
Which projects do you like that are not either N-Chain or Bitcoin SV? Like, is there anything that you like?
There are, but I'm not going to go into all of that at the moment.
Come on, give me one. Like, what's one that you respect, or a person that you respect that you don't work with, or doesn't work for you?
Oh, there are a number of people. I mean, Ryan Charles doesn't work for me. He has, with his PayMail solution and whatever else, it's quite a good initial solution that will hook into simplifying payments and things like this. So,
got it. Which are the projects that you think are like the most full of shit that just like when you look at them, you literally can't stop laughing?
Lightning.
And because it has a false promise, or what?
Oh, it's a total joke. It's a bunch of people who don't understand Bitcoin or what it's about, who want to create something that's different to Bitcoin, don't understand that the entire security model is based upon Bitcoin, so therefore you can't take it into Lightning and say Bitcoin doesn't apply. And it's just a joke built on a joke built on a joke.
Got it. For anyone listening right now that's like, Craig Wright doesn't believe in quantum computers and that like anything can retroactively be changed in the blockchain, like how would you answer whatever whatever media hype there is right now that says like some message was signed that says that you're a fraud? Like how can you explain that? Like if you can say there's no way to change.
No message was signed. You can't have a digital signature that is anonymous by definition. Sorry, so no signature. You can run a digital signature algorithm. It's not signing a message.
So like whatever message people were talking about the last week or two, that's signed anonymously? I guess I don't understand enough about it.
You can't sign you have to have either an identity attribute or an identity to sign a message. Someone can't go and say, hey, I've got a key, I'm signing. But if you think that, then you don't understand digital signatures at all.
So you're saying that like somebody's saying Craig Wright is a fraud and this is a message everyone's supposed to take as truth. You're saying that that was like not signed. I really feel like a layman right now, actually.
No, it wasn't signed because that was Antonopoulos's Dread Pirate Roberts defense that got kicked out of Silk Road prosecution, saying you have to sign, you have to register a key, and that has to be protected. And I'm going to have to end because I'm actually over and I've got another meeting that is right now.
I want that ringtone. Whatever that ringtone is, I want that ringtone.
I'm sorry about this, but I have to actually take this and because we've gone over and didn't realize what time. So
Craig,
sorry about
that. I appreciate your time. It was very nice talking with you. Yeah.
Yep.
Have a good one.
All right.
Bye.
You too. See ya.
Goodbye.